Everybody, welcome to Junkyard Theory, and today's guest is somebody who's worked as a VFX artist and a compositor on movies ranging from the Lord of the Rings trilogy to Man of Steel to Wolverine, and he's also the man who took away Harry Potter's wand and gave him guns instead, and sparked a whole internet meme sensation. Jason Lei Howden, thank you so much for joining us.
How's it going? Are you by one?
Are
you by one?
You got it right.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, a pleasure to have you on board. Like I've been meaning to, reach out to you for quite a while now. And when we did get connected, I was like, all right, guns akimbo, let's go.
Yeah. No, it's a fun film. Like it had it was a crazy process making it, but at the same time it was like, it was fun, sort of like putting a lot of my like the action tropes in there, and like I'm a big video gamer, so like putting some like gamer tropes in there as well, which some people got, and it was cool.
How did you like kind of get started in the industry? Like let's go way back and then come down to guns akimbo.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I like my first job out of high school was a video editor for a local TV station. So I was incredibly lucky. Like it wasn't like a big station, and it was kind of mad. Like it was one of those things that was only like 3 people working there, so you had to do everything, and like would film like speedway and sports, like basketball events, and then edit together like music shows as well. So I was like 17. I didn't go to college. I dropped out of high school and in my last year, and just managed to get this job doing that, and it was really fun. I did that for like 3 years, and then I did sort of various like heaps of crazy jobs, and then I moved up to Wellington, where I'm currently still living, and then went to film school like in the mid 2000s, and it was cool. Like our film school was like just a year, and so like it's very generalist. Like you don't, like some film schools in the United States, they specialize in like cinematography or editing or whatever, but this is just a year. So I think we were the last class to shoot on 16mm film though, which was cool. Just learning how to use like the Steambeck machines, and it feels so archaic even talking about it now. Like, but learning how to do that sort of gives you a deeper appreciation of like every frame that you film and how it gets processed and everything. It's so easy now. Like this is back when like I think we still had high 8 video cameras. We didn't even really have HD cameras, but so I did that, and then I afterwards I shot this short film that was all on green screen, and I didn't know how to do VFX. I just assumed I'd be able to like pay someone to do the green screen effects, and then I couldn't find. I had a little bit of a like government funding to shoot it, but I didn't have any money left over to do the effects, and I was like, shit. So then I taught myself how to do VFX just from online tutorials, and like and learned After Effects was like the first program I used, and then I sort of managed to get work from using these programs. My first job was like on a kids TV show called The What, which is like produced by Weta Productions, which is a subsidiary of Weta Digital, who do Lord of the Rings and District 9 and all those films. So it's kind of crazy, and actually I've been like I've just got a 2-year-old son, so he's been watching the show, because it's like a kids show of these like little aliens that go around the zoo and discover animals. So it's kind of like really weird. Like that was my first VFX job, and introducing him to that. But I sort of managed to stay in VFX, and then in my spare time I put together like music videos and short films, and I worked on like I think all 3 of the Planet of the Apes films and all 3 of the Hobbit films, and during like the last Hobbit I got a little bit burnt out. It was just, there was so much green screen, so many just marker removal. So I'm like I'm a 2D compositor, For people that know what that is, I guess it's like quite well known what that is these days. But yeah, so taking the CG and the 2D and making them look like they live in the same place and clean up and everything. But anyway, so like I had this opportunity. There was a competition run in conjunction with the New Zealand Film Commission, and it was called Make My Horror Movie. So the winner got like 200 grand New Zealand to make this movie, which is still pretty low budget. But I was like, that sounds really fun. Like I want to do something. I've been doing so much VFX. I want to do something that was practical and silly, like like an 80s splatter movie, like Bad Taste or Evil Dead, something like that. So we pitched for it, and there were like heaps of sort of segments to the competition where you submit like a synopsis or a rippomatic, which is like a bunch of like clips from other movies that you cut together to sort of tell the story, which is quite handy for marketing and for like pitching, and inevitably a script as well. And fortunately we won the competition, and then so I finished up at Weta and went and made Deathgasm, and which is a lot of Deathgasm was like sort of like autobiographical, because I grew up like a metalhead, or do you have metalheads in Sri Lanka?
Yeah, we do.
You guys have got a big metal scene, right? Yeah.
Yep.
And it's like, so I was like the long-haired like metal kid that everyone avoided on the street. And so then I I sort of like took my love of heavy metal and horror and put them together, and so like put these metalhead characters in like a splatter horror comedy. And it was one of those things I wasn't that sure how it would be received, or I never really expected many people to like it. It wasn't really about that. It was just about me doing something fun. But it caught on, and we got into South by Southwest in Austin, Texas. So after that, we did like this big festival tour, like which was great. I got to go overseas and visit a lot of countries, and I think the countries that loved it the most were like Mexico and Germany for some reason. Like I think that's because they've got like big metal communities over there. So that's sort of like how it was my first feature film.
Combining metal and horror, like two things that you kind of like love the most. Did that in any way kind of like help you make this was your first feature? Did combining elements that you love help the process in any way, and if so, how?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the more passionate you are about a task, the easier it is, and the better the outcome. There's been a few films which have had like pretty good scripts that I've read that other people have written, that I just couldn't find myself in it. Like I read them and there was some cool stuff in the scripts, but I think you have to be able to find yourself in a script, and if you can't find yourself, then I just don't know if you have the passion to really see it through. So it's one of those things that the more that you but for me it was very easy, because I could really relate to the characters, and I could tell like the costume designer, oh no, those boots would go better with those jeans, or no, this character would wear a band t-shirt like this, because I sort of knew the characters and what they were into. And I mean, I think a lot of like international metalheads saw that attention to detail, and a lot of the time metalheads are seen as the bullies in movies. You sort of see them like bullying people, like in movies like It. And I just for me, the metalheads were always like, we were always the nerdy kids at school. Like we were into Dungeons and Dragons, and we'd just like sit outside the library and talk about like horror movies and sci-fi movies, and we were the kids that were into Lord of the Rings before it was cool. Like so that was always my sort of like how I saw metalheads. And it was cool to like be able to put that up onto screen and to put that side of the story up there.
When I saw the trailer, I was thinking like I hadn't read any of your interviews or anything as such, and I felt like the Sam Raimi influence was like very distinctly visible. Evil Dead, and like how much have those movies like from the 80s kind of like influenced you? Because you don't really get that stuff anymore. The whole cheap gore horror vibe, it's not there anymore, but it's fun.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I mean Sam Raimi's such a talented director. Like I think when I watched, I think Evil Dead 2 I saw first, and I watched that when I was like 13 or 14. And it had a massive impact. Just I think because I'd seen horror movies before, but they'd been sort of like quite samey, good. But like when I saw Evil Dead 2, it was almost like an art film, or there was something else, like the sound effects and the way he moved the camera. I think that really affected me, because I just seen like a lot of films, it's a standard setup, like close-ups, like 2-shot reverse. It was, but with his film, it felt like every shot was like a different angle, and like I was just sitting there trying to work out how he was moving the camera around. It was, all those like the the Dutch tilt push in, and like when the moose, is it the moose or the stag head starts like laughing, and it's so insane, and like
the camera pushing through the woods. The tracking shots, the long tracking shots,
incredible. And this was when before VFX were like really commonplace. So these days we'll be able to stitch between shots and do all sorts to make that work. And and so definitely a massive influence. And same with Peter Jackson as well. I saw Bad Taste, like it was in like a department store when I was quite young. Someone had put it on like those, the wall of TVs. And I think that had a big effect on me, because it was awesome. Like there's like sheep exploding and all this stuff, but also because it had like someone with my accent on screen. And I was from like a small mining town in New Zealand. Like I never really thought I would be able to make movies. Like, sort of brought up thinking that we're going to work in the forestry or in the mines or maybe an orchard. Those were the jobs that you thought you were going to do, because that's like what your family did and everything. And so I think seeing, a movie with like people speaking New Zealand accents was like quite influential. It was like, and then I read about Peter Jackson. I was like, maybe I can work in film. So, I think Peter's done a lot for New Zealand. He's brought a lot of work over here, and also he's made New Zealand, made a name for New Zealand. If you ask most people in the world what about New Zealand film, they'll either say like Taika Waititi or Peter Jackson.
Yeah. I think the name Middle Earth is kind of synonymous with New Zealand right now.
Exactly, and it's cool. I think a lot of us, like, there was this sort of like hipster, like, oh my god, it's kind of boring, but at the same time, I'm like a massive geek, and like you go to the airport here, and there's like a giant like Gandalf, like on the back of an eagle, like a giant one, and it's silly, and I kind of love it. Like, yeah.
Was Fellowship of the Ring the first movie that you worked VFX on, or
it is on IMDb? But it's kind of a cheat, because I was still like I think I was like 18 or 19 when that came out, or when that was being made. So what happened was I worked on like the remaster for 8K, and so it was sort of like, how they have those, this is how I felt, like, those people that touch up like Renaissance paintings and like delicately like brush the dust off. That was sort of like we were doing, because when they blew the film up to 8K, it kind of looks like a little bit terrible. And a lot of the old mistakes, like VFX mistakes, were really apparent. Like there was like rotoscope lines, and there was like characters with no motion blur. You could see like they were just like roughly rotoed out. So me and my team, this is like 2 years ago now, we we went back and remastered basically like the trilogy, and then my IMDb credits, I'm credited as like because the remasters don't have their own IMDb page. It's still like credited as those films, which is kind of cool though. Like so it looks like I was like really like successful when I was like that young. Although the opposite's true, I really wasn't.
But I mean, like still working on a remaster like that, it's still something. Plus, you work on
it was really fun, man. It was during when New Zealand first went into lockdown. Yeah, it was actually last year. I remember now. So I was working from home. So it was my first like remote work job. So it was a good one to like because it wasn't really intense. So it's a good one to start. Now I've like worked remotely on quite a few different projects, and I'm more used to it. But at the time, the technology was like it was sort of mind blowing. You know, I couldn't believe I was working on, you know, my work computer from home, and you know, it sort of messes your brain up a little bit. And yeah, I'm used to it now though. But yeah, it was great fun. Like you know, we did things like we had to paint the titles out, some of the subtitles out because like they'd lost the original print. And we had to paint the English Elven subtitles out so they could put like different languages there, and you know it was really cool. I don't have like I've got a pretty terrible TV, so I haven't seen the 8K. I've still got the DVDs though, like you know the special edition DVDs. They're good films, man. Like you know, they hold up. You know, some films, you know, they're good, but you don't end up watching them again. But yeah, I mean, I think the Lord of the Rings films really do.
It has the rewatchability.
Really well.
Yeah.
And every shot's a meme as well. You know, you talked about memes before, but like last time I watched The Fellowship quite recently, and every shot is like, you keep your secrets, or you know, like. Every shot is a meme. It's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, like Gandalf nodding his head. I think I found a video once. Like it's like 11 hours straight. Gandalf nodding his head to some saxophone thing.
I love it.
But, I want to talk a little bit about like since you've been in the VFX industry as well. Like you work on Avengers, Man of Steel, Wolverine. The Hobbit trilogy as well. Like you know, back then when they make the Lord of the Rings, like they resorted to quite a lot of special effects, prosthetics, and stuff like that. Whereas when it came to the Hobbit, like quite a lot was CGI, and some people loved it, some people hated it. There's that whole, you know, the special effects versus green screen debate out there. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, and I don't, you know, want to throw anyone under the bus or anything or be controversial, but like. You know, I much prefer the practical effects. It's interesting because my boss at Weta was part of the VFX team on like Fellowship, and there was like 10 people, 10 compositors or something like. And then the Hobbit, there's like hundreds. I don't know. Like I preferred that. I can see why they did what they did, and it was like, you know, it was. At the time, it must have made sense, but I didn't like I think they shot it in like, was it 45 frames per second or something? And it was, I don't know. I just, I couldn't really get used to it. It had like this real VHS effect to me. Yeah, I mean, it was interesting how that all went down because when I was started my first job there, like Guillermo del Toro was working on it. And so I'd see him in the corridors there, and I'd be like, you know, I was a big fan of Pan's Labyrinth. So, but yeah, I saw the room that I had my VFX reviews in was actually the room where all his concept art and the sculptures were. And it was really fantastical. Like there was like goblins with like multi-jointed arms, like 6-jointed arms. There's really long arms. And I think his version would have had a lot more practical effects and puppetry. You know, when you look at stuff like Pan's Labyrinth and even Hellboy, how there's a real combination of, you know, puppets and practical effects and VFX. You know, I think that approach would have worked better. It was just sad because the Lord of the Rings movies are sort of known for like how organic, like there's so much shot outside in the New Zealand mountains and countryside and everything, and like without any VFX. And then when you look at the new ones, you can just tell that it's, you know, so much of it's on green screen. It sort of maybe took something away from it to me. But it's one of those things, and I think we're still learning how to use that technology properly, and I think the more planning that goes into the VFX, the better it is, and the more time and the more. Yeah, I'm not anti VFX. I've been working in VFX for like over a decade now. So, but there are some shots where it's like, man, it would have been easier to shoot this or do this practically, or maybe would have maybe not easier, but I just saw like there was an effect from the new Mission Impossible, the Tom Cruise movie where he just they built a real old steam train and just they sent it flying off these train tracks, and I'm like, man, that would be easier to do in VFX, but that's so cool that they did that practically, I'm a big fan of when you're on set and you pull off a practical effect, the crew really loves it as well, and the actors really like it, and it feels tangible.
Definitely. So as a VFX artist, you've been in the industry for quite around 20 years. Did VFX, playing around with VFX, help your transition to a feature film director?
A little bit. I think it made me a little bit annoying as well for the VFX supervisor on set, because I was always like, no, do it this way, But yeah, it's interesting. For Deathgasm, I did about half the VFX shots myself, and I guess the cool thing about Deathgasm is no one really mentions the VFX like that, which is kind of like a compliment, because there were. We did cheat and use some gore effects on that. But yeah, it was interesting because I was working full time, I think, on Wolverine, and then I'd come home and work on Deathgasm doing the VFX, and we didn't have the internet in my flat in Melbourne, so where I gave the neighbors $20 if I could have their internet password, and so I could finish shots and then send them to New Zealand to be chucked in the film. And yeah, so it was very low budget, and but it worked, and a lot of it was just painting out wires, because a lot of things that go wrong when you've got blood pumps and stuff, there'll be a blood pump hose will come out and look really fake, or a boom mic will go into shot, just little things like that.
Little cleanup stuff.
Yeah, clean up stuff, and so I think it does help in a way. You get an eye for it. I think whenever you're working in VFX, you're always talking about the eye. He's got a really good eye. It's all about, I guess, the problems that you can see in a shot and how you're solving them. And I think the thing that works best when you're working on in VFX is when you can you get to know the VFX supervisor or the director and know what they like and sort of get inside their head. So then you're when you present shots to them, you know that's they liked the facility being a bit grungier, a bit dirtier, so I'll make it dirty in this shot. Or yeah, a lot of it is just getting in, and it's different between supervisors and directors. I remember working on the first feature film I worked on was Ghost Rider 2 with Nicolas Cage, and which I'm still incredibly proud as one of my favorite film experiences, because it was I got to composite with fire, and it was a really fun VFX job, no matter what you feel about the film. But the directors were really cool. It was the Crank directors, Brian Taylor and I think Mark Neveldine. But they, you present shots to them and be yeah, this is awesome, man. And it's oh, this is just a work in progress. We haven't done grain, or we haven't graded it properly. And they're no, it's final, it's final. They were so enthusiastic. And whereas sometimes some people can be pickier, and you get into the finest, zooming in to see each pixel. So, yeah, it's interesting, and a lot of it is it's funny. You spend like, I had a friend who's an animator that spent like 2 months on a shot on Avengers, and then like you watch it and the shot just goes by in like a second. You're like, wow, but yeah, the standards are so much higher these days because people are so much more savvy. Like even sort of like casual film audiences know a bit about VFX, and people are a lot more film savvy than they used to be.
True. The concept for guns akimbo, like, this was ridiculous, man. Like, how did you come up with it?
Yeah, I mean, it was like, I don't know exactly where it came from, but it was just this idea of this pacifist, or like sort of like a there's heaps of different names. Like it was someone like myself who was like basically like a sort of a hippie vegetarian, sort of like anti-war sort of person who has like guns on their hands and they get forced to be like an action star. I was like, well, it's kind of like, that sort of person, watching them go through it and go from being like, a pacifist soy boy or whatever, and then having to like fight people and sort of stand up for themselves was, kind of an interesting transition. So yeah, again, that came from like, a personal, sort of where I was as a person, like at the time. Like the main character worked for like a mobile game company, but I worked for like VFX companies, and very much like a lot of the gamer influence. Like you get into this thing where you just like, you work all day in front of a screen, and then you go home and just play games in front of a screen all night. And I at one point I wasn't even seeing any sunlight, like literally like no vitamin D, and and yeah, sort of taking that sort of person and putting them in this very like cartoonish. I wanted it to be like when when we're thinking of the bad guys, I want them to like feel like Streets of Rage, that Sega Mega Drive game, how like all the bad guys are like really over the top and weird looking. So I wanted to look like that, like just have a bit of fun with the concept, because I mean, I love movies like John Wick, but it's usually like slick gangsters, wearing like sharp suits and everything. So I wanted to have a bit of fun and make it cartoony. I think the more cartoony you can make something, the more you can get away with like violence. So yeah, it came from there, and I'd actually written the script before Deathgasm. So the idea was to do something like very, very low budget. So like Robert Rodriguez, I was a big fan of like Rebel Without a Crew. Yeah, and El Mariachi, and his early work, and I was like, man, like it's he didn't have any excuses. He just went out and did it, and I'm like, man. So I was originally going to do it as a short film and try and get funding for a bigger film, but I ended up in Los Angeles, like pitching to these producers after Deathgasm, and I didn't really have any other scripts, and I just mentioned Guns Akimbo, and they went for it. So yeah, it just sort of took off from there.
What was your pitch like? I'm curious to know.
I was basically like, imagine this dude has guns in his hands and he has to fight, and this is the game of death. I even pictured it was so long, so it was like, that's quite terrible. But yeah, but basically like he's been hunted down by like this top assassin who's like, she's the leader, top of the leaderboard on this game of death that like everyone's watching, sort of like a Twitch, except like real life violence. And yeah, originally Nyx, she was like a male character, but I think making her just the idea of this guy being chased by a woman and hunted down by this woman made a lot more sense. And I think it would have been like a bit more boring if it was just like hunted down by some dude. And we got the first person we went, I had this like short list of like 5 actors who I wanted to go out for the lead, and Daniel Radcliffe was on that list. And then, so he was the first person we approached for the role. And then I just like got an email from producers saying like, Dan wants to Skype. And I was like, oh shit. Awesome. And so, yeah, I set up the Skype, and was like really nervous, and I was thinking about, you know, what I'm going to say, and, you know, and everything, and trying to like really, you know, like convince him to do the film. And then I got on the Skype, and he just like talked, like I could hardly get a word, and he just talked about how much he loved the script, like for like half an hour solid, and at the end of it, I was like when I could finally get a word, and I was like, so you came? He's like, yeah, man, yeah. So yeah, I mean, he's you know, I think it comes across in his work. He's an incredibly positive, enthusiastic actor that just really loves working with people, really, you know, really loves working on films. And yeah, he came over to New Zealand, and yeah.
He's had a very, how do you say, a very adventurous kind of journey since he wrapped up on Harry Potter, like Swiss Army Man. That was like, I was like, what the hell?
I love that film, and I love how like the craziest parts in the first 5 minutes, it's just like it sort of really gets you, and then there's like there is quite a nice like emotional story behind it all as well. And but yeah, I mean, I think he's just loved putting himself out there, and you know, I mean, he's done the mainstream, you know, film franchise, so now like he's, you know, approaching more indie roles and more different roles. And yeah, I mean, I think that's great. I sort of think of him as our generation's Michael J. Fox, you know, that sort of a little bit bumbling but likable, you know, dude. And I think a part of the appeal for him was that he had always wanted to do an action movie, but you know, because of like his sort of been typecast a little bit, so no one's gonna, you know, he said to me, you know, no one sort of sees me as this John Wick character, but like, you know, I think that was really fun seeing him do that. And, you know, I think he was incredibly dedicated. Like he'd get up at like 6 a.m. and like jog. Like he was in really good shape, like really, really good shape. It's incredible. Like his dedication to it is just phenomenal. Yeah, he got like sick on the first week, and you know, like runny nose and puffy eyes and everything, and just never, you know, on screen he just never shows it, you know, just yeah, really, really professional. Yeah, got to know everyone on the crew, from the assistants and, you know, lighting technicians to you know, on up. Yeah, I mean, just a great guy.
That's so cool. And casting Samara Weaving as Nyx. What was that process like? That's very interesting.
She was fantastic. Again, it's like I really want, you know, I think there was a few actresses that got pitched our way that were like sort of known for being that, you know, the badass female. The thing I liked about Sam was that she, you know, wanted a Nyx that sort of like looks like kind of like horrifying in a different way. Like she's not like, you know, doesn't have the muscles or the stature, but she'll come into a room and she'll just look like she's been snorting glue, and like just like it sort of comes from her demeanor and her attitude. So yeah, I think Sam was like a great choice for her. And again, like she's had like a really interesting career, and, you know, just did the G.I. Joe movie, and yeah, you know, she's done a lot of like horror and like, you know,
Ready
yeah,
was
really
pretty interesting as well.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, no, a lot of fun to work with, and yeah.
We have a question here. Hey Jason, did working with an actor like Daniel Radcliffe make it easier for you?
Totally. Thanks so much for the question. Is that Ramid?
Ramod.
Ramod. No, thanks for the question. No, definitely. Like, because I mean, we had a 40-day shoot, but the script was so dense with action scenes. And so like Daniel was just such a pro. He didn't need as many takes, and like there were times where it's like, you know, he'd just say to me like, I'm pretty much just going to get like 1 or 2 takes for this, aren't I? And like, you know, yep. And it's like, yeah, let's do it. And he's one of those actors that, you know, you go into the edit room and you almost always end up using his first take, and you get like a second take for safety. But like, yeah, he's just so switched on. So yeah, it made it a lot easier. You know, and I'm used to working with different actors, and I think different actors need different things from directors. Sometimes some actors want just to try it their own way first, and just like, and then do it in rehearsals, and then talk about that with the director. Or some actors like will come up to you before a scene and like have like 50 questions about the character, whereas some, I think Dan just got the character straight away, and he was just like, both Dan and Sam, they brought the characters off the page and gave them dimensions they didn't even think of. But getting actors that, I love working with the same actors as well. Like I've done that. There's a lot of actors from Deathgasm that I brought over to Guns and Akimbo just because I knew how to work with them, and that was a lot of fun as well.
How do you pronounce his name? Is it Milo? Or is it Milo?
Milo, yeah.
Milo,
yeah.
Really love
again, like So he was a child actor as well. He was on Power Rangers.
Yeah.
And
there was a time travel movie. I think it was Blood Punch.
Yes. Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah, he's fantastic. Like, again, he's got a similar energy to Dan, whereas like, both, they'll give you what you asked for in a take, and then like 100% more, and you'll be just watching the screen going, yes, like this, because you can just see when, like there was stuff like Milo would just do when we're doing Deathgasm, he'd just like, he wouldn't even tell me he was going to do it. He'd be like, just like something simple, like you have to climb through a window. He'd slip and fall on his face, and everyone on the crew would just be like, try not to laugh. And yeah, stuff like that would end up in the film. Like, not all of it, but sometimes it's great just for the actor to surprise the director sometimes. And so I sort of love that. Some directors just like sort of scream and they want it exactly the way they want it, but I'm definitely more like a collaborative director, where I'm a part of the crew, I'm a part of the team. It's not my film, it's everyone's film. So I love collaborating with people and hearing their vision, and like getting them to bring a piece of themselves to the film as well.
Yeah, because like if you are kind of like a dictator on set, it just becomes harder for people to collaborate with you down in the future, right? So it's always
I think so.
That sort of,
and I mean there are some directors that are like, you hear stories. A big one.
Horror stories. You hear horror stories.
You hear horror stories, but also they do really good films. And so I'm like, like people like Stanley Kubrick and William Friedkin from The Exorcist, and you're like, I love their films. They probably traumatized a few people. Like I think Shelley Duvall was like never the same after The Shining. But at the same time, it's like it's hard, because also like I don't you'd never want The Shining or like The Exorcist to be different, but at the same time, it's like like I heard William Friedkin like slapped an actor. One of the priests wasn't like giving him enough reaction, so just like slapped him and then like called action. I'm like, you probably shouldn't beat your actors. Like, basic human rights, but yeah, I mean, and it is a stressful situation, and it's a weird industry, and it's very much like you feel removed from like when I have to go uptown to do something. Like I see everyone in suits, and I'm like, I feel like, oh, these people are like civilians, like. I feel like people in the film world are like, it is like our own little world, and everything outside, it's hard to explain to people outside the film industry like what it's like. And yeah.
So what if you kind of don't get the performance? It's like the actor doesn't necessarily hit the exact beat that you want. How do you kind of convey that? Is it like, do you talk to them through like the emotional pathway, or more like technical? Never line readings, I suppose. But what's your approach like?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. Like one time it wasn't working, and I it wasn't the actor's fault. Like she was great, and it wasn't until we got to do the scene that I realized that my writing was terrible. And so what I did in that specific instance is I said, like, let's have like a coffee break, and I basically got the script and just rewrote it, like just sharpied like our entire sentences. And I think it was just a case of like the actor was good, but the script, and it's hard sometimes, because on both films we didn't get really much of a time to workshop. That said, like, I think you can over workshop with actors as well. Like if they know the lines too well, it'll become like a chore. Sometimes it's good. Like I think Dan said, like, we had like one rehearsal with him and Sam, and they were both nailing it. And I was like, well, do you guys want to rehearse more? And Dan was like, not really. Like I sort of feel like it'd be cool just to go into it fresh, So because I think it's like with music, like when you hear. Sometimes you hear recording and it feels like, oh, this is the 50th time the band have done this, like this song, and it just comes across in that. Whereas, like, it just feels fresh sometimes when you take that approach. But other times it's just about like working out why it's not working, and sometimes it's like, unfortunately, it's like those moments just reach the cutting room floor. Like there have been entire scenes on both films, unfortunately, that just like didn't really make it for. And that's hard, because like some directors it's just like beat by beat by the script, but I think both of my scripts were quite dense. So, there was just so much going on. So I'm definitely like more of a like sort of an editing room director. Like I like to get lots of material and like be able to play with the angles and the cutting. But it's a hard one because sometimes all the elements. The writing is good, the actors are great. I'm trying my best to give like direction, but sometimes the combination of parts just don't work, and it's hard. It's a hard one. I mean, a better director could probably make it work, but like sometimes you just admit defeat.
How many takes did it take to get the Warner right? The shot where like after the guns have been like nailed onto Daniel's hand, because that's
long shot. It was funny. Like I think it was about 7 takes, but it was such a long shot to set up for, and the Steadicam operator was like drenched in sweat afterwards. Like it turned out to be like, because how we did it, we didn't even really like plan it like that until the morning. It was actually like planned out to be like a series of shots, and we were running out of time. So I was like, sheesh, how are we going to make up the time? We don't have enough time to shoot the scene. Why don't we just try and do it in one shot? And so I went to set that morning and got my iPhone, and like I just sort of filmed like the sort of movement. I danced here and like, and then I showed the actors and the Steadicam operator the video that I took, and we just went from there. So it turned out to be almost like a dance between Dan and the Steadicam operator. Which
there was that one moment where you kind of see the Steadicam operator's shadow on Dan's back. Was that left intentionally?
Well, no, it was meant to be painted out. We sort of ran out of time in the VFX. Good spotting though, but we got unfortunately we got incredibly tight with VFX and because of the delivery date for getting into like the Toronto Film Festival, so it was meant to be painted out. And I think
kind of felt it was a little bit meta, because that's the point from which the audience kind of the audience in the film, they kind of start watching Dan's character being hunted. So I was like, all right, probably there's like a camera moving around, so you guys like left it.
It's a better answer. I should have said that. No, it's funny. Like it's sometimes I watch old movies and you see like the microphone comes into shot, and I sort of like it. It feels kind of real. It feels like I think some stuff is so over, processed these days. So it's nice to have a few organic things, and there's I think a lot of older films, even in like Game of Thrones, I think there was like recently a Starbucks cup.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the shots. And everyone made a big deal about it. I was like, cool. Like, why not? Like, it's great. I think Lord of the Rings was someone with a wristwatch or whatever. It's the state. I don't think it necessarily detracts from the film. I think in the last take though, Dan drops the phone, because he was still getting used to, and we left that in because there were other things that were good about that take. And it was like, oh man, should we go for this other take, which it doesn't have their same emotions, but he doesn't drop the phone an extra time. And I'm like, it's kind of cool how he fumbles it, because he's getting used to the hands as well. And I think it worked all right. As when you watch it too many times in the edit room, you're like, oh, it feels like it's like fumbling too much. But I think it kind of worked. That's the problem with those long shots, is you just spend so much time you're weighing up, and you always go for performance inevitably.
I think the extra time that he drops the phone, it kind of it's pretty organic, and it adds to the story, like you said. He's getting used to the guns, and it's not easy. So I was wondering which take that was. So it was the last one.
Oh, I think it was. It was it was definitely one of the later ones. Actually, I think it might be the second to last, where I'm like, oh, it's almost perfect. We'll get one more, and it's like, nah, we'll just take the last one. Let's move on. But I mean, I think even though we had more of a budget than Deathgasm, I think kudos to the crew. The crew were great for because I like to throw ideas out there, and it is putting a lot of pressure on the crew to suddenly go, oh, we're doing a one today, when we didn't, in a bigger film, it would have been planned for weeks. And it's we had this other thing where Dan, Miles has been the two cops approach him, and he's on the street, and then he runs across the road, and I'm like, oh man, it's kind of boring. What if there was a car, and he rolled on the car? And we didn't plan it or anything. I just talked to the stunt coordinator, Steve McQuillan, and Dan's stunt double. And to their credit, they weren't like, oh no, that's ridiculous. We can't just shoot that right now. Because I just brought this up on as we were shooting, on the street, and there's all this safety protocol and everything. And then they just were like, yeah, let's do it. We just need a car. And I'm like, I looked around at the crew, and I'm like, has anyone got a car we can throw a stunt coordinator at? And everyone was like, no, because they're film people, and they know film crews are how rough film crews are. And so I had a rental car, because I'm from Wellington, but we're in Auckland, and I'm like, oh, okay, use my rental car. And we did one rehearsal, and Mark, the stunt double, rolled across the car, and then we looked at we weren't shooting, and the car was all dented and scratched. I'm like, oh, how did you make so much damage to this car? And I'm like, we'll have to do it now, because we've already damaged the car. And so we got another few takes, and it wasn't a big stunt or anything, but it just helped maybe make the scene a bit more, give a bit more life to the scene. And I managed to dent the get the dings out of the car, and got my bond back for the rental car as well. So
nice.
But it's nice. It's cool, just sort of coming up with stuff, and it's sort of it's one of those things that you sort of throw at the crew, and it's
Gotcha.
Sometimes
I have a question here. So how did you plan the lighting on this long take?
It was all I think overhead LEDs. So that apartment set would sort of planned that lighting based on that. So fortunately, when I said we're doing a one, the lighting was already sort of in place to do that. But that apartment set was quite funny, because it was in a German factory, this cold, dingy German Munich factory. And yeah, it looked like a really, it's just weird. You're walking around this like dusty old factory with like German writing from like the 1940s everywhere, and then you walk through a room and you're like a New York apartment and you're like, man, this is nice. Like, why is this character depressed? I live here. It's my house.
That look that you guys kind of like went for was very distinct, and like I don't know, it felt very unique. When did you guys like plan that, like in pre-production itself, like?
Yeah, I mean, we wanted to go for something that was like very oversaturated, and we had these really cool LED lights, which were they were sort of like modular, and they could be like put up anywhere, like no wires. They were battery powered, and then the DOP and the gaffer had like this app on their phones, so they could like change the lighting and the brightness and color temperature and everything just from an app. And yeah, that really helped, because you stick a few of them there and it sort of looks like John Wick, it looks kind of neon, and like that crack house at the start of the film, you check a few there, and we wanted it to look like a comic book, like I'm a big fan of, like, I used to read the X-Men comics especially, and they were always like hyper saturated, like lots of like blues and reds, and same with video games as well. So that was sort of like my inspiration there.
It had a very how do you call it? It was borderline Michael Bay, and then you had the whole John Wick vibe kind of going in there. It was like merged together. So
yeah,
it was pretty unique.
Yeah, I mean, I love those movies. I think like Tony Scott was also a big inspiration. I always I loved his movies, how they felt, sort of a little bit gritty, but also like stylized. There was always like steam coming out from like vents, and so, but I think all those influences together, and the Crank movies as well, were big inspirations. Just like how over the top and crazy they were, and yeah.
There's another question here. So as a director, how important is it to show your energy on set, and how often do you look out for your crew? For example, after a hard couple hours of the shoot, talking to the Steadicam operators, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how important it is. Like, I can be like up and down with my energy levels, but like, I think for me the biggest thing is like crew safety, and like I've never had anyone injured on one of my sets, and it's a big thing when you're doing like lots of stunts, and because at the end of the day it's just a film, and I think health and safety is incredibly important, and like mental health as well. It's a big thing. Like people work extremely long hours and don't see their families often, so in New Zealand, I think it was kind of funny, because we were all the New Zealanders went over to Germany, because we shot half New Zealand and half in Germany, and a lot of us Kiwis were staying in the same hotel, and so every night after a shoot would be straight to the pub, like the bar of our hotel, and like drinking for 2 hours, and the Germans were like, my God, these New Zealanders are out of control. They just drink every night, and it's like, you're Germans. Like, I thought you guys were big drinkers, but the Germans were complaining about, at the hotel were complaining about all the New Zealanders. Like, yeah, I mean, it's nice. I think, it's something that's like changes between cultures as well. Like, like in New Zealand, I think you can be a bit blunter with people on a personal level, and then have a beer afterwards. And whereas like working in Germany, you had to be a bit more diplomatic, and it's one of those things. But at the end of the day, I think it's like you have to try and give people as much time as possible and not stress them out too much. I mean, it's just films, the whole reason that I got into filmmaking was like for escapism, like I think the biggest compliments that I've had on my, especially Deathgasm, a lot of people were like, man, I was really depressed, and then I watched your film and it cheered me up, and I love that. So, I never want people to have a bad time, during the filmmaking process either. And yeah.
Was there any social commentary that you were kind of going for with Guns Akimbo?
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely some there. I mean, it was interesting. It was sort of like a lot of it was my take on, funnily enough, like, the media. Like, I think Schism was like maybe a representation or analogy for like this idea that even the word schism, that the media make everything hyper violent and oversaturated. I've just seen like there's been awful images from Afghanistan this week on TV, and it's like, I mean, which is, people need to know about this stuff. Don't get me wrong. I think it's important for people to be informed. But it gets to a point where you're watching like real life like gore and real life tragedy on TV, and I think people get a bit addicted to it. And I think that's been true, over the last few years. Especially seeing what happened with like the coronavirus and then Trump. You get like addicted to watching like this craziness on TV, and it becomes like. I mean, like, it went from like Game of Thrones was like the must-watch thing, and then everyone stopped watching Game of Thrones. We're watching the news because the news was crazier than like, I've got mixed feelings about it, but like that was, my idea was like sort of like skewing that and trying to maybe exaggerate that and maybe have a bit of, I mean, I wouldn't want to say like commentary because it was such a silly like, movie, but just my feelings on like at the end of Guns Akimbo, everyone's like just cheering for this guy to die, and they're just normal people, like everyday people at home on TV, and it's like how you've become, on social media and stuff, you can become desensitized, and you see comment sections like on Twitter or one of those obscure ones like 4chan, or I never got into those, but there was always an inspiration behind that. Like, people become so dispassionate towards other people, and they just say the most awful things, and it's like, it almost was like, and like I think in Guns Akimbo, that was like they were like wanting this guy to die. And they'd almost separated him as a human being. It was like dehumanizing him. And then like at the end, they sort of see him like the tragedy of it. And then they sort of turn off their screens and they're like, oh, they actually see that this guy was just a person. He wasn't just like a, like a prop. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, and to be honest, I'm not sure it's sort of like, I don't know if it's getting better or worse. I mean, I grew up with the internet. I was like, very much, when I was a teenager, the internet was just coming in, which is a weird thing to think of. But like, I can remember a time without the internet, and everyone was like, it was heralded as like the internet's going to make life better, and in some cases it has. It's made this possible, which is amazing, and it's done a lot of good for the world. But then at the same time, there's still a lot of like work to be done on. To me, I always think like, I'm probably going on a bit of a rant on this, but it's like if you were in a bar, like in a pub, and you were having a discussion with someone, you had a disagreement, you're just like, the way that you'd approach it would be different than like on Facebook or Twitter, whereas it gets inflammatory really fast because you're not seeing the nuance, you're not seeing like the discussion, you're just seeing words, and you're not, whereas if I was in a bar discussing something, be like, oh, you'd have a laugh, and you'd be like, no, I don't really like, agree with that, and oh no, that's cool, let's have another beer, so I don't think we've really learned how to
it's easy to hide behind a keyboard,
exactly. And that was sort of Daniel's character as well, like he was sort of like hiding behind the keyboard, and like like he was, I guess, a keyboard warrior, like he which is sort of like kind of like, you sort of see this now, but he was like trolling like anti-vaxxers, which is kind of weird before the coronavirus, but he was like trolling anti-vaxxers and trolling like right-wing groups, and then like they track him down, Schism track him down, he's trolling Schism, and they were his like focus, and he was trolling Schism, and then they find his IP address and track him down. So it's that idea of like, you can say something in real life to someone, but what happens if they do like, come, yeah.
Yeah, and what do you call it? As a director, whenever you put a film out, it's you are putting yourself in a vulnerable position, and you kind of got to learn how to take a punch, figuratively, from reviews, comments, and basically people on Twitter, which you are not
exactly, and which which I wasn't that successful in with my sort of like canceling, but it's funny because like like I took a side of an argument, and obviously a lot got taken out of context, and it wasn't really my fight, but I've always for me I've always like tried to stick up for people who I feel were bullied, and I think that's the other thing with when you're dealing with online interactions, you sort of jump in without knowing all the facts, or and so I sort of got into my own keyboard warrior thing where I sort of like got involved in something that I shouldn't have, and a lot of people, like it's funny because like a lot of people thought I was a horrible person from that, and but what's really weird is like I've literally like in the 90s I was like I'm such a hippie in real life. Like I've literally been in a fist fight with an actual skinhead Nazi while wearing a dress and makeup. That was me. I'd get into actual fights with Nazis, and so I sort of came down on the wrong side of that like argument. And I'm incredibly sorry for anyone. I think the thing that was really bad was that the film, like people attacked the film and attacked Dan, and whatever someone says, I think when you attack like a film like that, there's hundreds of people working on it, and obviously I'm incredibly sorry for any embarrassment that I brought to them through it, and but yeah, I mean it's just sad that because they obviously didn't have anything to do with it, so it was not the best of times, and yeah, I mean, one of those things, just sort of like, you just got to work through it, and just, yeah, I mean, I sort of tried to defend my position a little bit, and that just sort of like made it worse. So at a certain point, you're just like, well, some people are going to have this view of you, and some people aren't, and you've sort of just got to like move forward and try and do the best in other situations, which I've tried to do, and yeah, it's an interesting one, like because
we all learn from our mistakes at the end of the day.
Exactly, yeah, but like doing that learning so publicly is like, and I really feel for young people, I mean, when I was bullied a lot when I was a kid, but like real bullying, like like you get beaten up after school every day, and like come home with like black eyes and bruises and stuff, and which is which sucks, but at the same time these days, like kids, they film each other doing it and put it online, so not only I think it's almost worse, like that sort of like that form of bullying, like online bullying is. I'd rather just get punched and then go home than like, people calling you names online and all that stuff. I think it's almost so I really empathize with like young people today. Yeah, I mean like yeah, I mean people. I guess the new generations are probably learning or have learned from the mistakes of like the older generations. I really post any pictures of my son online, just like occasionally, just because I don't want to have his whole life. I love him to bits, but also I want to give him a choice for what he puts of himself, like online. So he can sort of make his own mind of if he wants to have like an online presence or not. And I think, yeah, a lot of people have to make that decision, but yeah.
You and I were talking about, before we went live, about how meme culture has kind of, taken over the internet, and at the same time that you incorporated a meme itself from from a picture that was kind of like leaked onto the internet while you guys were shooting it, and you managed to put that into the movie, the one with Daniel Radcliffe holding up the guns. So.
No, that was hilarious because we were, and I think a lot of like films, like especially like the Marvel films must get this all the time, but like it was a really odd experience for me to have like be sort of like so widely memed while we're still shooting the film. So yeah, we sort of like managed to like, when we filmed it, it was on one of the biggest streets in New Zealand, in Auckland. And we got control of one side of the road, but we couldn't control the other side of the road. So we could like film, but people could just come up behind us and do whatever they wanted. So we literally went from like a few people saw us doing stuff, oh, what's that? And then it got around that Daniel Radcliffe was there. So then like at the end of the day, there was literally like 1,000 people behind me, just all like watching and clapping, and it was surreal, and then like some of those pictures went online, and then like on Instagram people started like doing fan art, and then it sort of bled into the film because we had this part where Miles realizes that he's famous and he's scrolling and he sees like people have memed him, so we used the meme of Daniel to be that meme. We're just like, I think we just like hit up the people that did the fan art on Instagram and said, oh hey, do you want to be in the movie? So yeah, it was really surreal and cool. Like I love meme culture. Every night I wind down just on 9gag, just like looking through like dumb memes. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting how many news, like I saw something about coronavirus like months before it was like in the mainstream, on the news. There was like a meme about coronavirus on 9gag, and I was like, like how it's going, one of those like, oh yeah, like bushfires in Australia, like a virus in China, like this is in like January or something. And it's like, oh, that's kind of funny. And then like a few months later, we're all like locked down, like, man. So yeah, I mean, in a way, like, and I think a lot of like people probably get their news from just memes now, and like this alternative like take on the world and pop culture. And I think it's really democratized information as well, because you don't need to be like rich or famous to make a meme. You just need to be like funny or engaging, or like it just needs to like go viral or whatever they call it these days. But
it's like a new benchmark for movies as well. Like the more memeified your movie becomes, the more popular it is in a way.
And you've got to watch it with like Star Wars to not have like stuff ruined like by memes as well, because there's so many spoilers. And yeah, my first film, Deathgasm, got memed as well. That moment of like Brody and Medina like on the park bench, like this like metalhead and corpse paint with like this nice girl, the good girl just having ice cream together. And a lot of people like use that as like just in that contrast between people, that they find quite funny. And so sometimes I'm just scrolling, I'll just see like a meme from a film I did. I'm like, oh, that's kind of like, yeah, really weird. I think I've even commented on comment sections on 9gag, like, oh, this is from my movie. And like people are like, no, you're full of it. Like no one believes me. But yeah.
I think our time's kind of like running out, but to close, I kind of want to ask you, you did 5 short films before you ventured out and directed your own feature. What were you like the least prepared for?
I think just like, definitely the post-production process. Man, I mean, I don't know. I think my first films, the thing that I learned from like doing my feature films was like, make the stuff that you want to make. Like, because my first films, I was trying to make these like arty, films, because I knew that's what would get funded by the New Zealand Film Commission. And I was like trying to make films not for myself, but for like other people. Like, I didn't know my audience, I guess is a better way to explain it. And then since I've done, Guns, Akimbo, and Deathgasm, I've learnt my audience and what I like doing. And I think that's a big thing, is like, just if you like making arty films and for like highbrow, do that. But if you like making silly films, do that, because if you're trying to do something that you don't want to do, it's so much harder. And my earlier short films, you can see it, like there's like some good things about them, but at the same time you can see it's a bit disingenuous. Like it's not, like you can sort of feel that he's just sort of like trying to do something that he doesn't believe in. And it wasn't until I just threw that out and just did like stuff that I liked doing, then other people liked it, and I realized like, oh, that's what it is. That was the missing ingredient. And but yeah, it was funny. Like, and I'm not sure. I enjoyed film school. I had a really good time at film school, but at the same time, I could have taken the money that I used for film school and just made a short film, and I'd probably be in the same position I was now. So I mean, I think the incredible thing these days for people is that they can, learn everything online. There's so much, I mean, even I've started like delving into like Unreal Engine and like Unity, and just like, I'm a big gamer fan. I'm like, man, I mean, one day I might like to make a game. Like, what would I do to do that? Like, you don't know how to make games? And I'm like, well, I could learn. and yeah, just like there's so much knowledge out there, like and so many YouTube videos, and you can do anything you want these days. You don't have to, I came from like a poor family, and I never really had the resources, but as long as you've got an internet connection and some basic software, you can hit the ground running. So yeah.
Can we expect a sequel to Guns Akimbo, or
I don't know?
Because you kind of left it open-ended.
I don't know. I think I sort of like wrapped up that world. Yeah, if I was going to do anything, I think something involving Nyx would be cool. Like just like or like telling something like from someone else's point of view. But yeah, I'm currently working on a few different things, like a disaster movie, which I think we're hoping to shoot in February, of like in development of this a slasher film, like a American holiday slasher, like Jason Voorhees style.
Nice.
And what else am I working on? We've sort of been working on Deathgasm 2 a little bit. That's like a pet project. Like there's sort of not much money in, splatter movies have got such a limited appeal because some people get it and some people like, you're showing cut up bodies, what's wrong with you? So there's always got to be like that. There's a very limited audience for splatter, but it's sort of something to do for fun at least. And yeah, just I'm currently doing VFX as well. Currently working on the Borderlands film by Eli Roth, which is like I love the video games, so it's really cool to see how that I mean, I think fans of the games are going to love like the direction it's gone, and it's I'm not sure how much I can actually talk about it, but it's on my IMDb so people can see that I'm working on it. But yeah, it's that's exciting. And I'm
You wrapped
sort of like
work on Shang-Chi as well, right?
I did, yeah. I didn't do too much. I sort of came in at the last minute just to help on a few shots. And yeah, that was really fun. It's I think it's like only my maybe second, because I worked on the Avengers as well, which was really fun. And the you've got to like some people are sort of over the superhero thing, but you've got to give them credit for like the world that they've built and how successful they've been. It's I mean, I'm a big comic book fan, and it's just great to see. Yeah, I really hope they do like an X-Men reboot with like the same team that have done the Avengers, because I mean they were my favorite comic books when I was a kid, and I'd love to see like a new, I think I love Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, but the last few X-Men movies haven't been that great. So I'd love to see them reboot X-Men with that fresh, like that Avengers approach, and then have like, a Magneto movie and, another Wolverine movie or whatever. I'd love to see that.
I think everyone's kind of waiting for that, and hope they integrate the 90s cartoon, the music from that. That was
I love that cartoon so much, man. It's I think I was in my early to mid teens when it came out, but I was really into the comic books at that time. So when that cartoon came out, I was just like, "What? This is incredible!" And
fresh, yeah.
yeah, they really nailed the. It's looking back on it, the animation's a bit janky, but for the time, it's great. And you're right, that intro sequence is so good.
Yeah. Jason, thank you so much for joining us, and all the best with everything that you're working on. Hopefully,
awesome.
Maybe once Deathgasm 2 is out, you could hopefully come back on board.
Awesome. It's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for chatting, Akash.
No problem. Thank you so much again, Jason. Till then, this is Junkyard Theory, folks.